mother found buried in the Arizona desert. Police say that she was killed while out on a first date. 12 News journalist Gabriella Becerra spoke with her mother and is joining us now in studio with how she's being remembered. Gabby?
Well, Caribe, this family has a lot of questions about what happened to 21-year-old Arianna Jones. But the question they want answered the most is why.
On July 5th, 2026, 21-year-old Arianna Jones left home for a planned first date. She had been communicating online with 24-year-old Dominic Rodolico, and after getting to know each other through social media, they agreed to meet in person. Their plans included going to a movie before spending more time together. At the time, there was nothing publicly known to suggest the evening would become the focus of a homicide investigation. Surveillance footage later confirmed that Arianna and Rodolico were together at a movie theater. Investigators say the two left the theater in Rodolico's vehicle, making it the last confirmed time Arianna was seen alive. After that, she stopped communicating with her family and friends. When Arianna failed to answer calls or messages, her relatives became concerned because they said it was unusual for her to lose contact. 2 days later, they reported her missing. Officers responding to her apartment found her cell phone still inside the residence, along with her dog confined in a crate without food or water. Those circumstances led investigators to believe her disappearance was unexpected. Detectives began reconstructing Arianna's final known movements by reviewing surveillance video, analyzing cell phone records, examining social media communications, and interviewing witnesses. Their investigation identified Rodolico as the last known person to have been with her. As detectives followed the available evidence, their search extended from the city to a remote desert area near Lake Pleasant. Within days, investigators made a discovery that changed the direction of the case. Evidence collected during the search, along with information gathered throughout the investigation, led to the arrest of the man Arianna had gone on a first date with. Subscribe to Matrix Crime and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our new case.
We are here to discuss an update on our missing woman, 21-year-old Arianna Jones. Unfortunately, we did not get the end result for this family that we were hoping for, and we believe that we have discovered Arianna Jones's remains in a secluded desert area just north of the valley. That said, we have also made an arrest in this case of 24-year-old Dominic Rodolico. We believe that the two of them had been in communication with one another through some social media channels, and then they met for a date of some type. The two were seen at a movie together and then ended up in this remote area where we believe this crime took place. I can tell you that when we have interviewed Mr. Rodolico, he is not claiming to be involved with this situation. Instead, he is saying that the two of them were in this remote area and that two individuals showed up and attacked them. And at some point, he made his escape, and Miss Jones stayed behind, and he believes that that's how this all took place. We have sufficient enough evidence to believe that Mr. Rodolico is the person responsible, and he is facing homicide charges. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Let me give you just a second here.
Yes. I saw that out of the corner of my eye.
As far as their relationship, I mean, had they known each other for a long period of time, or was this just an initial date, or what do we know about their relationship?
I can tell you that detectives are still pulling a lot of the forensic evidence from their phones. We do believe that they have been in contact at least on a couple of different occasions, but we believe that this may have been the first and only time that they had gotten together physically.
Do you know what kind of assault was committed on her? Were guns involved, other weapons?
Right now, we're waiting on the medical examiner's office to come back with their results, so we're not releasing how the cause of death was.
What can you tell us? Like, he says he wasn't involved, but there seems to be a good deal of evidence that points in the direction that this Could have been premeditated?
Well, we don't know as far as what the motive was behind all of this, but we can tell you that there is sufficient enough evidence to link them together. There was sufficient enough evidence to show Mr. Rodolico was in that area several times before they actually were in the area. So we don't know if he was planning this or if this was happenstance from the situation that they were in. But we have sufficient enough evidence to show that they were coming and going from that area.
There were items found at the scene that seemed to directly link their previous journey to the movie theater. Can you talk to what was found at the scene?
Yes, well, we know that when they attended the movie that they did go to the concession stand and that they had different forms of refreshments, and one of those was a cup that linked to that movie theater, and they were found at the scene of the crime.
Can you walk us through a little bit about what her family first discovered and what officers first discovered when they first got the missing call?
Yes, back on July the 7th was when we were first alerted that she had not been heard from the family. They were very adamant that there was a lot of communication between them usually. When our officers obtained that search warrant and they showed up at the apartment of Miss Jones, they did find it kind of disheveled. They found her cell phone had been left behind. They also found that a dog that was crated was still there and had been in its own waste for several days and no food. So that was enough of an indication that there at least had been some kind of suspicious nature.
What can you tell us about where her remains were found? Does it appear that she was buried with some concrete? What do you suspect happened, that he went back and forth several times to bury the body? What can you tell us?
Our detectives, I can tell you, did find a shallow grave in that area, and they found a body in that grave. Again, we are still waiting on some testing results from the medical examiners, but there was enough evidence, physical evidence of not only clothing, but other things matching Miss Jones to be able to identify her.
Has her body been completely removed from that grave site?
I'm not commenting on that.
What do detectives think transpired here? That there was some kind of argument, or is there any kind of speculation as to what may have transpired here, going on the date, when she died, leading up to her death?
Unfortunately, that's where we're stuck at. We're not quite sure where the motive lies in all of this, if this was a crime of passion or if this was a situation that just escalated out of control. What we are focusing on here is that we are really devastated for this family. I mean, this was a family that was hopeful that they were going to find their loved one in a good state, and unfortunately this was not the case. And so we were hopeful to give a better answer or a better result for this family, but at least we're going to give them the closure that their missing loved one has been found.
Speak to Rodolico's behavior as the surveillance just cleaning his car. It seems like.
Yes, so we did have some surveillance video of him cleaning out the back seat of his car as well as cleaning out different items. There was some unusual behavior taking place within the actual vehicle. We're not sure if that was him removing certain items or not, but there was enough consistency to know that it was linking him to the actual crime scene. We can also tell you that he had some wounds on him that were consistent with some stab wounds. He maintains that that was from the two individuals that showed up there in that desert-like area and attacked the both of them, but we believe that this was a situation that took place during this particular attack against Ms. Jones.
Just more broadly, can you speak to kind of that surveillance that has helped you? I mean, he's on video, it seems, in a lot of different places and was able to be tracked on these.
You know, we can't go on and speak more highly about not only our detective works, we also want to really recognize the great work that our Special Investigations Unit as well as the U.S. Marshals Task Force did with all this. I mean, this was basically put together within 4 days. On top of that, we are all aware that we have a real-time crime center, and all of those cameras and all of those different situations that we can put together helped us piece this together. We were able to pinpoint him attending her apartment. We were able to pinpoint him attending these different areas, going to the movies. So all of this, working in conjunction with all these agencies, really helped put closure to this in 4 days' time. I can tell you that he does have an arrest history, but it's not anything really significant. We're talking about some theft, nothing to the level of homicide. He was on probation at the time of his arrest, and now, from my understanding, he's being held on a $2 million cash bond.
Is there any timeline as far as they went to the movies, as far as when she may have been killed or where they
It appears that all of this took place on that evening. According to what he was able to tell us, as they attended this movie, they then took a drive out to this remote area. He claims that they were continuing their date in that remote area, and that's when the two individuals showed up and attacked them.
Is it thought that he went back to her apartment and kind of created this forced scene, or that he would have forced her out of the apartment to begin with?
I think that that's still all under investigation.
And just to clarify, and I think this is correct me if I'm wrong, but the call about the missing person came into police after all of this had already transpired.
Well, I mean, we believe so because the family had not heard from her in a couple of days, and at that point, they grew concerned. And matching what looked to be a person that had been missing for some days in that apartment, that's how all this basically began.
You touched on the investigation and the good work of the detectives and federal agents, but it sounds like a lot of technology was used to try and solve this case.
That's correct. Without the technology, this would have been much harder, but the fact that we were able to have this surveillance video show where they were as far as the movies were concerned, and we were able to find them in different areas of the valley using other cameras. We were able to pinpoint their cell phone usage in different areas. All of that combined helped us really solve the case, on top of the good detective work from our folks.
And you had touched on the story that the suspect had told. It was pretty clear that just didn't add up.
We can tell you that his story continuously changed. As he kept trying to describe the attack of these two individuals, the attack became a little bit more dramatic, less dramatic. He talked about the fact that at one point he escaped and just left her behind, and that's why he was confident that if this was, we were interviewing him about this missing woman, that she was probably not alive.
He never reported the incident.
He never reported the incident to us. He never reported to anyone other than his family that he had been a part of an attack to explain the cuts on his person, but he never informed them that there was someone else involved.
He never reached out to 911. He never made a call.
He never made a call to police or to anyone to let anyone know about this attack. It wasn't until this family reported her missing that we were able to put all of this together.
Did the family recognize the name of the suspect?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you know what social media platform they met on?
I do not.
You had touched on it earlier, just, obviously you cover a lot of cases, and this is not the ending you ever want. It's just heartbreaking for the family.
This really is a heartbreaking situation. I mean, this was a situation that could have been completely avoided. We see a lot of times crimes of passion. I'm not saying that this one necessarily is, but a lot of the times we see individuals meeting up with strangers because they've connected in some kind of social media platform or some other way. And, it's really important that people just be as careful as they possibly could be. They should also let family members know if they're meeting up with someone that they're not very familiar with. Again, we were really hopeful that we would be able to provide this family a better closure and reunite them with their loved ones, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. All right. Thank you, guys.
Arianna Jones was 21 years old. She lived in Glendale, Arizona, a city in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and she was the mother of a young child. Family members who knew her well described her in consistent terms. They called her loving. They called her caring. They said she was devoted to her family, and that devotion showed up in the way she stayed connected to the people closest to her. She kept close relationships with relatives, and those relatives communicated with her on a regular basis. That regular contact would later become an important detail in the case, because it meant her family knew almost immediately when something was wrong. Arianna lived independently in her own apartment. She was responsible for her own household, and part of that responsibility included caring for a pet dog she kept at home. Outside of her day-to-day routine, she maintained an active social life. Like many people her age, she used social media not only to stay in touch with friends and family, but also as a way to meet new people. That combination, an independent life, a young child, a pet she was responsible for, and a normal, active presence on social media, painted the picture of a young woman going about an ordinary routine in the weeks before July 2026. It was through one of these social media platforms that Arianna first came into contact with a 24-year-old man named Dominic Rodolico. The two of them began exchanging messages, and that online communication continued for a period of time before either of them suggested meeting face-to-face. Investigators who later reconstructed the relationship believe that the in-person meeting they eventually planned would be the very first time the two of them had ever seen each other outside of their online conversations. Eventually, the two settled on a date. They arranged to meet in person on July 5th, 2026. This wasn't something Arianna was keeping secret from the people around her. According to what family members later told investigators, they were aware that she had plans to go out that evening, and they knew, at least in general terms, what she intended to do that night. Nothing about the arrangement stood out to the people close to her as unusual. It was, on the surface, the kind of plan a lot of young single people make on any given weekend. A first date with someone they had gotten to know through messaging online. On the evening of July 5th, Arianna met Rodolico as the two of them had planned. Surveillance cameras positioned in the area later confirmed that they were together that night, giving investigators a documented starting point for the timeline they would eventually build. From that footage, investigators were able to establish that the pair went to a movie theater together. Surveillance video from inside and around the theater documented their presence there, and receipts along with other records from the theater later became part of the evidence gathered during the investigation. The cameras did not stop recording once the movie ended. Footage also captured the two of them leaving the theater together afterward. In that footage, Arianna was seen getting into Rodolico's vehicle. At the time, it was simply the next step in what appeared to be an ordinary first date. In hindsight, and in the context of the investigation that followed, that moment took on much greater significance. The video of her entering that vehicle became one of the last confirmed sightings of Arianna alive. From that point forward, investigators had to work to reconstruct where the two of them went next, since there were no more surveillance cameras along the route to rely on. Cell phone records and other forms of digital evidence became critical in filling that gap. That data indicated that the pair traveled north, away from the city and away from populated areas, leaving behind the businesses, the streetlights, and the cameras that had documented their movements up to that point. Investigators were able to trace their movements toward the region surrounding Lake Pleasant, a remote area located north of the Greater Phoenix metropolitan area, known more for hiking trails and open desert than for anything else. Based on that evidence, authorities believe the two of them ultimately entered an isolated stretch of desert in that area. It was a location that offered very little chance that anyone passing by would witness what happened next, and very little chance that anyone would stumble across the area at all without knowing exactly where to look. According to the allegations brought by prosecutors, it was in that desert location that Arianna was killed. Investigators have not publicly disclosed the exact cause of her death. Certain forensic findings connected to how she died remain sealed at this stage, a decision tied to the fact that the criminal case against Rodolico is still active and ongoing. What investigators have alleged is that after Arianna was killed, her body was buried in a shallow grave in that same remote stretch of desert, and that steps were taken afterward to conceal the location of that burial site. In the hours and days that followed the date, Arianna's family suddenly lost contact with her. For a family accustomed to hearing from her on a regular basis, this kind of silence was immediately out of character. She stopped responding to phone calls. She stopped responding to messages. There was no explanation, No heads up that she'd be unreachable. Nothing that fit the pattern of how she normally communicated with the people close to her. As that silence stretched from hours into days, her family's concern grew steadily more serious, to the point where they felt they could no longer simply wait for her to get back in touch. On July 7th, 2 days after anyone in her family had last heard from her, relatives made the decision to formally report Arianna missing. That decision set the official investigation into motion. Officers responded and conducted a welfare check at her apartment, and what they found there only deepened the sense that something had gone seriously wrong. Her apartment was empty. There was no sign of Arianna anywhere inside. Her cell phone, meanwhile, had been left behind in the apartment, which was itself an unusual detail for investigators to note, since it meant she had gone somewhere without the device most people rely on to stay in contact with others. And in another room, her pet dog was found locked inside a crate, with no food or water available to it. A clear sign that whatever had happened, Arianna had not been home to care for it in the days since the date. Taken together, an empty apartment, an abandoned phone, and a dog left without care, these details significantly raised the level of concern among both the family and the officers who responded that afternoon. With Arianna now officially reported missing, detectives began the methodical work of reconstructing her final hours. That work involved gathering surveillance footage from locations around the city, pulling her cell phone records to establish her movements, reviewing the social media messages she had exchanged in the lead-up to July 5th, conducting interviews with people who knew her, and collecting information related to the vehicles involved in the case. It was slow, procedural work, piecing together fragments of video, data, and witness accounts into a single, coherent picture of Arianna's last known movements. As all of that evidence began to come together, one name kept surfacing again and again as the last person known to have been with Arianna before she disappeared: Dominic Rodolico. The digital evidence investigators collected played a central role in the case from very early in the investigation. Surveillance cameras had already captured the moment Arianna met up with Rodolico, the two of them together at the movie theater, and then the two of them leaving the theater together afterward. That footage gave investigators a clear, documented sequence of events for at least the early part of the night. It was the kind of evidence that couldn't be argued with. Time-stamped images of two specific people, together, at a specific location, at a specific time. Cell phone data extended that timeline even further, past the point where the surveillance cameras stopped covering their movements. It allowed investigators to trace the general route the pair had traveled after leaving the theater, which, in turn, helped narrow down where searchers should focus their efforts and allowed detectives to build a much more complete timeline of what had happened that night. That same location data reportedly placed Rodolico near the specific area where Arianna's remains would later be discovered, connecting him directly to the location at the center of the case. Without the movie theater footage, and without the cell phone records, investigators would have had very little to go on beyond the fact that Arianna had left her apartment and never returned. As the investigation continued, search efforts expanded into the remote desert terrain surrounding Lake Pleasant, an area that covers a wide stretch of undeveloped land north of the city. On July 11th, authorities located what they believed to be Arianna's remains in that area. The body had been buried in a shallow grave. In the time that followed, her identity was formally confirmed, bringing an end to the 6-day search that had begun with her family's missing person report. Once the burial site had been located, investigators shifted into processing it as a crime scene. That process led to the recovery of a number of items from the site. Among the items recovered were souvenir cups from the movie theater the two of them had visited earlier that night, a pair of latex gloves, and bags of concrete mix, along with other materials that investigators believed were relevant to the case. The presence of items like the theater cups tied the burial site directly back to the earlier part of the night, connecting the date at the movie theater to the location where Arianna's remains were ultimately found. Each of these items was carefully documented at the scene, photographed, and then submitted for forensic examination. That forensic work covered several distinct areas. Investigators examined the physical conditions of the burial site itself, including how the grave had been dug and how it had been concealed. They examined soil evidence taken from the area. They examined the individual items that had been recovered from the scene, and they examined biological evidence collected there as well. Separately, medical examiners performed an autopsy on Arianna's remains. Based on the information that has been made public so far, authorities have not released the precise cause of death, the exact manner in which she was killed, or certain other forensic conclusions that were reached during that examination. Those details remain part of the sealed portion of the case, withheld while the prosecution against Rodolico moves forward. When detectives eventually spoke with Rodolico directly, he offered his own account of what had happened that night. According to investigators, he claimed that he and Arianna had been attacked by two unknown men out in the desert. He told detectives that these two men had stabbed Arianna and that he himself had managed to escape the attack. It was an account that, on its face, would have shifted responsibility for what happened away from him entirely. Police, however, stated that the evidence gathered during the investigation did not support this account. Both the physical evidence recovered from the scene and the digital evidence investigators had compiled over the course of the investigation reportedly contradicted key parts of what Rodolico had told them. In other words, the story he gave detectives did not line up with what the surveillance footage, the cell phone data, and the physical evidence from the burial site were showing investigators. On July 11th, the same day that Arianna's remains were located, police arrested Dominic Rodolico. According to investigators, he was taken into custody while he was in the process of cleaning his own vehicle, an activity that investigators would go on to examine, closely given its potential connection to the case. Following the arrest, investigators went on to search that vehicle in order to look for any additional forensic evidence that might be connected to the case, adding to the physical and digital evidence they had already compiled over the course of the investigation. Prosecutors subsequently filed charges against Rodolico. He was charged with first-degree murder and, separately, with abandonment or concealment of a dead body. Those two charges reflected the two central allegations in the case: that he was responsible for Arianna's death and that he took deliberate steps afterward to hide what had happened to her. Following those charges, he was ordered held on a $2 million cash bond. As of July 2026, investigators have not publicly disclosed a clear motive behind the killing. The court documents that are currently available to the public do not establish why prosecutors believe Arianna was killed, or what may have led to the events that unfolded in the desert that night. For a case built so heavily on surveillance footage, cell phone data, and physical evidence from a burial site, the question of why still remains unanswered in the public record. Authorities have indicated that their investigation into the case is continuing, and it's possible that further details, including a motive, will come out as the case moves through the court system. In terms of the court process itself, Rodolico has made an initial appearance before a judge. At that appearance, the charges against him were formally presented and the terms of his bond were set. The criminal case against him remains active, and it is still in its early stages. Going forward, The proceedings in the case are expected to move through the standard stages that accompany a criminal case of this kind. That includes the discovery process, in which both sides exchange evidence, preliminary hearings, pre-trial motions, and, eventually, the scheduling of a trial. Each of those stages will play a role in determining how the case against Rodolico ultimately moves forward. As of July 2026, no trial has taken place in this case. No verdict has been reached, and no sentencing has occurred. Under the law, Dominic Rodolico remains presumed innocent unless and until he is proven guilty in a court of law. Arianna's family has spoken publicly about the impact of her death in the time since her remains were discovered. They have described their grief in the aftermath, and they have described Arianna in terms consistent with how she was known throughout her life, as a loving mother, as a caring daughter, and as someone whose life was taken far too soon. Throughout the course of the investigation, relatives have also spoken publicly to call for accountability and for justice in connection with her case.